We have Grandmaster Arjun Erigaisi, the India number one, entering the game. He has won 2 games in a row. Before this one, he beat Hans Niemann in round 3, not in a row. And in round 5, he beat Gukesh. And right now, he is in the joint lead in the tournament with 3.5 points out of 5. So, an excellent chance for Arjun to win this tournament with 2 rounds to go. And there you see him bringing his favorite protein bar with him, and he adjusts all his pieces. The arbiter comes in and starts the clock. His opponent is not yet here. He's going to play against Nihal Sarin, one of the top players of Indian chess. They both will be teammates at the Chess Olympiad later in the year, and Nihal comes in with his second Grandmaster Sethuraman. Nihal has had a kind of lackluster event until now, and there you see him entering in. He has had 4 draws in a row and then a loss to Nodirbek Abdusattorov, so he's on 2 out of 5. The players are ready, and Nihal writes down his score sheet. Arjun is about to make his move. This, dear friends, is the Neuro game of the day.
In chess and in life, lack of attention and focus costs you games and key moments. Instead of going for that third cup of coffee or that energy drink that overstimulates you or gives you jitters, try Neurogum. It's viral in the US. It has a clinically proven blend of natural caffeine that gives alertness and L-theanine that gives you calm and stable focus without the jitters or the crash. Try Neurogum. Link is in the description.
Arjun opens with pawn to d4, and he adjusts all his pieces. This is very typical of Arjun. Before making a move, like before pressing the clock, he adjusts all his pieces, and there you have him pressing the clock here. Nihal Sarin, what will be his response to d4? You can see him. He adjusts all his pieces before making his move. Small quirks of the players, and something that they have some sort of a routine that they would like to follow before each game. Calming himself down before the game, and Nihal plays pawn to d5. Will Arjun play the London system with bishop f4? No, he plays the Queen's Gambit with pawn to c4. And Nihal responds with the Slav defense. Now the Slav hasn't been played so much recently at the top level. Everyone has been putting their pawn on e6 and taking on the Queen's Gambit decline setup. Knight to f6. And now the knight comes to c3, putting pressure in the center. And a6 played. This is known as the Chebanenko Slav. And one of the main moves here is c5. But Arjun plays pawn to h3. Now, this is not as popular as other moves. And Nihal takes couple of minutes and plays e6, asking Arjun if his move h3 makes any sense in the semi-Slav structure. Okay, e3 played by Arjun. And h6 played by Nihal. If you were to give this game to someone and ask like moves h3, h6, a6, you could be forgiven to think that there are 2 beginners playing this opening, but these are world-class players. b3 played by Arjun, bishop b4 pinning the knight. And now if you play bishop b2, I have queen a5 and knight e4 putting pressure on the diagonal. So bishop comes to d2 here. And now knight to d7. Just placing the knight here. And something should be done about the bishop on c8. But the bishop comes out to d3. And Nihal will think what to do about this later. I guess you castle. And now white will castle as well. You will see that both the players keep getting up from their chairs after almost every move. This is classical chess, so you can think about it that sometimes players think for 10 minutes on their moves and there is a space for them to walk. Bishop comes back to d6, and I'm actually tempted to make the move e4 here. It's a very typical move which white plays to get a small advantage, but he goes rook to e8. Sorry, rook to e1 with the idea of e4, and he goes rook e8 and e4 is played, breaking in the center with the idea of pushing the pawn to e5. Now look at this. If you take here, this is already better for white, clearly. So Nihal takes on c4, and his point is if you take back, he wants to play e5. But instead, Arjun goes straight away e5, forking the two pieces. Very interesting. Nihal has to take the bishop. Okay, if you take on f6, I simply take back. I'm a pawn up. So e takes d6 is kind of forced. So he takes here. And now this pawn is a bit weak, but the bishop can come to f4 and defend it. So knight to b6 played. Maybe there were more accurate moves, like maybe c5 was better, but knight b6, bishop f4. Now you defend the pawn. And I believe knight b d5 would be played here by Nihal. He attacks the bishop. He also attacks the knight. Queen d2 makes sense, I believe. But Arjun takes here. And now c d5 is an option, but the best move is e d5. Not at all an easy move, but Nihal plays it, of course. He plays here. And now the d3 pawn is taken. So the material is now equalized. And Nihal finds this excellent move, plonking his rook on an advanced outpost on e4. If you take here, I take back with the pawn. So bishop goes back to h2 because the bishop was hanging. And now bishop f5 is possible. He goes knight e8. He's going after the d pawn. But now you can trade on e4, get the queen in. That's the point. So he takes on e4. D takes e4. Queen takes e4. Knight takes on d6. And the thing is, if you move the queen, I'm simply fine. So he takes here with the idea of getting in to e8 with a check. So Nihal takes back the bishop. Yes, 38 minutes. Arjun down to 25 minutes. And Arjun gives a check here. And Nihal must drop back his queen. Otherwise, this pin is quite brutal. And now he takes on f8. And if you notice that if black after king takes f8 gets bishop e6, bishop d5, black would be doing really well. And so Arjun very quickly gets rid of his weakness, d5. And in fact, he's giving up a pawn. But in return, he would love to get his rook to c7. That's the plan. So rook c1 with the idea of rook c7. King comes up to e7. And now a check. The question is, does black have something to claim an advantage, or is it just even? Because the rook is so active. And if you move ever the bishop, the b7 pawn falls. So he brings his king in. He wants to get king e2, king d3, and maybe even king d4. g5 played here. And let's see how Arjun plays now. He goes pawn to b4. And the idea could be a4, b5 or a4, a5. b5 played by Nihal. Now this is a bit risky because yes, he saved the b pawn. He's ready to put his bishop on e6. But the rook can give a check. Naturally, bishop e6 is what you would like to play. And that is what Nihal plays. So now he's got his bishop out, a3 played, and in order to activate his rook, he plays a5. Because otherwise, if he moves his rook somewhere, then the a6 pawn was hanging. So a5 makes a lot of sense. And Arjun goes rook b6. If Arjun manages to make a draw here, he would still stay in the lead in this tournament along with Alireza Firouzja. So a draw should be possible here. AB, AB. And claiming the 7th rank for black. Now, if you look at this position very quickly, you will see that, oh, this pawn is a bit weak, the knight can settle here. But on deeper inspection, you will realize that the black king is weak, the white king is cut off, and that makes all the difference. Because I'm simply coming behind your pawn, and if you were to push it, I'm simply bringing my king in, like king e4, king d4, king c5, and I try to win this pawn. He goes rook b4. Maybe if you went king e4, there was check, right? So that's the reason why maybe he went here with rook b4. And now king e4. So threatening check, pushing the king back. Knight d2 check played. And you can play king d4. By the way, there's no second time control here. So Nihal down to 6 minutes 53 seconds. Arjun has only 4 minutes 18 seconds. He goes king c5. And this pawn is going to be lost. But on the other hand, the white king starts to get a bit active. Although check comes in. And now king d2, I guess. Well, king c3 would not be great because of d4 check. King d2, he gives a check. So the king is pushed all the way back here to e1. And now you can pick up the pawn on b5. That would be a clean extra pawn, but he goes back bishop e6. Because, oh, you can't do that because take here and white is winning with a check. So actually he first goes bishop e6, knight to e5, and now takes the pawn. Rook takes b5. And Arjun has to keep the rooks on the board, but he blunders with just 48 seconds. He takes it. He needed to put his rook on a7. It was still even. But now the problem is that the black king is active. The knight is not stable on e5. And the knight can be kicked away. So Nihal has a winning position, king c5, with the idea of king d4. f4 played. And now g takes f4. But he plays g f6. Wow. The knight comes back. And king to d4, entering with the king. He takes the pawn. And Nihal Sarin can take back the pawn, fg. And it's such a difficult position to defend because I'm going to go bishop f5. He just controls the e4 square. That's a good move. But h5, grabbing more space, converting such endgames are always a bit tricky. g3 played. The h pawn is a bit weak. And Nihal waits. He's like, look, Arjun, if you go king e2, I get king c3. If you go king c2, I get king e3. If you move your knight, pawn is hanging, so h4. And now keeping more pawns on the board. g4 played. Arjun has 57 seconds. Nihal played that last move with just 4 seconds on the clock. The knight is coming here, but the bishop already defends this pawn on h5. And after knight f4, maybe just king e4 with the idea of coming here to f3. He comes king e2 and pawn to d4 pushed, d3 on cards, knight d3, bishop b5 pinning and winning. So knight comes to e6, and can we give a check? Or maybe we can give a check with the pawn. Yes, he pushes the pawn. d3. If you go king f2, I can even sack the pawn and get my king in. So he goes king d2. And now come in here. Yes. And you give up this pawn, but you win both of these pawns on g3 and h4. And this is winning position. King takes d3. King takes g3. Wow. It's insane how Nihal Sarin managed to outwit Arjun Erigaisi from a completely equal position. He doesn't even go for the last pawn. He's like, I'm just simply going to play g3, g2, and I know that I have the right colored rook pawn, which is the light square, and I have a light squared bishop. So the queening pawn, because it's the same color as the bishop, black wins, even if the g pawn is lost. Knight comes to e2. The arbiter brings in the new score sheet because we are on move 59. After 60 moves, you need to start writing a new score sheet. He goes knight d4. And now the bishop dominates the knight. The players could take a new score sheet, but before that, Arjun Erigaisi has resigned. Nihal Sarin scores his first win of the tournament, moving to 50% score, 3 out of 6. And for Arjun, it's a heartbreak, because with this loss, he falls back half a point behind Alireza Firouzja, and his momentum is broken. And he was quite close to a draw, but one must commend Nihal's persistence and also the fact that from a very equal position, he managed to convert this into a win. So great play by Nihal Sarin, and hard luck for Arjun Erigaisi.